So with the new kickoff rule, there's one team that was reported as potentially trying a safety at kicker. Do you expect that to be something we potentially see more of? And how would you sort of prepare your kickers in tackling drills or anything?
No, listen, I saw those comments by Coach Tobe, who's a close personal friend. So, I understand the theory of maybe putting a position player back there. Here's the problem with that. The issues arise because the placement of the kick with the new rules is at a premium. And so if you have a position player that can really place the ball, then absolutely that could be a benefit to you. The problem is the risk reward of getting a bad kick, because the penalty for getting a bad kick is really, really high with the new rules. Because if, the other day we were out here practicing, and obviously if the ball goes out of bounds, the ball goes to the 40. If the ball lands short of the 20, it goes to the 40. So if a position player mishits the ball and say it lands on the 21-yard line, the drive start's going to start at the 40. So it sounds great in theory, and I've heard a lot of coaches talk about maybe some alternative kicks, some line drives, because obviously the hang time's irrelevant. Got it. Maybe some knuckleball types of kicks. And listen, we're like everybody else. We've taken a look at all that stuff too. Again, it's going to be a risk reward. It might be a situational thing. For me to sit here and think that someone's going to do that 100% of the time, I think that's a little bit aggressive, if you will. And again, I say that because the field position is going to be at a premium. Again, if you hit a touchback, a regular touchback, ball in the air, lands in the end zone, it's coming to the 30, the ball hits the ground, skips in, touchback, it's going to the 20. To run the risk of a team starting at the 40-yard line with this new rule is just something that I think is going to be maybe tried out in the preseason. I think, listen, more than ever before, these preseason games are going to be really fun to watch from a special team standpoint. Everybody, the fans, the coaches, the players, everybody's going to have their eyes on it because it really is a first. We could stand out here and simulate as much as we want in practice, but until we get to those games, we're not really going to get a full idea of what the whole play. There's been a lot of estimates and a lot of guesses and a lot of guesstimates on what it's going to look like, including ourselves, but until we kind of get into action. So, I've seen a lot of those comments about position players and different kind of kickoffs and things like that, but I think it'll be really, really interesting to see how that plays out.
Coach, along those...
another check in the Taysom Hill box? I mean, he was a kicker in high school.
Well, listen, he's the backup everything here, so I think Taysom's listed on the depth chart at like 15 different spots. So yeah, listen, he was our emergency guy in the past. So, but no, like I said, the kickoff location might end up being, who knows, because no one knows, but it might end up being one of the more important aspects of this new play, where that ball lands. And if you can have a guy that consistently land the ball in the premium locations, wherever those might be, that's going to be really, really important. So, we'll work on that again tomorrow. We'll work on it Thursday, so it's going to be good.
Coach, along those lines of working on the theories, have you already decided you're definitely going to use Taysom and top running backs in that return role, or what's the risk reward on? I mean, obviously, traditionally you didn't.
Yeah.
But
listen, I think with the way the new rule is, because it's really lowered the injury risk, and now it has essentially become the first play of offense and the first play of defense. I think your whole roster is available to you. And listen, some of it might be situational. You might not use Alvin Kamara 100% of the time, but Alvin Kamara is probably going to be back there at some point, back there lined up at return. And AK and I have had that conversation. Same thing with defensive players. You might not have defensive starters out there every single kickoff, but if you're kicking off at the end of a game and you have a pretty good idea they're going to return the ball, you may have 2 or 3 of your defensive starters out there, which you didn't have those guys in the past. And so, as you start to think through all the different things and the different way it changes the game, think about the end of a half, right? At the end of a half in the past, if there was 4 seconds left, you could squib kick it and kind of, run out the half, if you will. You can't do that anymore. The clock doesn't start until the ball touches a player. The ball's got to make it to the landing zone on a fly. And so, what do you do in those situations? Do you kick a touchback? Do you kick a layup down there in the setup zone and let them return to get the time off the clock? So a lot of those game management situations are also going to be very, very different. I think that's probably a little bit one of the under the radar things that's coming along with this new rule, is that some of those end of the game situations and scenarios are going to be interesting. A team scores with 2 seconds left to take the lead, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown. All right, well, you can't just kick a little dribbler and end the game. you've got to put the ball down there in the landing zone. So the game's essentially not over. And so I think some of those end of the game situations are going to be much more exciting than they were in the past. And I think that's where you're going to see maybe some of those position players, those high-profile guys, maybe show up a little bit more.
Darren, what have all those in-the-game situations, what have you all done to prepare for this? I mean, I know Randy Miller was here. I know he had experience. I mean, have you all picked brains of guys that have been active with us in other leagues to find out those strategies?
Yeah, I have spoken to a bunch of the guys that certainly coach in the XFL. Myself, DA, we watched every single XFL kickoff, every scenario, 1 second left, end of game situations. We've already started to prepare the team. But again, Jeff, no one's done it. So it's other than the guys in the XFL, which again, I know everybody kind of falls back to that because it's the most relative thing, but there are a lot of differences also. And so it's really never been done before, so that's going to be interesting. But the end of the game scenarios in the XFL are very relative. And so we have watched a lot of those. We've actually watched those with some of the players already as well, and we'll still continue to educate the guys as we go. I see it kind of feels like every time we have a special teams meeting, we throw a little more, another nugget at them. All right, hey, this is something we haven't thought about. Hey, this is something we haven't thought about. So, I'll give you guys one. You guys have seen the rule before on the sideline where if a player goes over to the sideline and gets a foot out of bounds and touches the ball's essentially out of bounds. Well, that's something that no one's thinking about. That's now the same with the 20-yard line across the field. So if I'm a player and back one of the returners and I get myself up over the 20-yard line and touch the ball, I'm out of bounds. That ball's going to the 40-yard line. Something we've never, ever, ever seen before. And so those are because the 20-yard line will be officiated just like the out-of-bounds line. So essentially you now have a third out-of-bounds line added to the field on kickoffs. So there's going to be a lot of things that deal with that 20-yard line that we've never, ever seen in the NFL ever before. And so that's going to be a really interesting aspect of it.
So how does this change how you coach, having to implement all these new things that people haven't seen before?
Yeah, listen, it's a challenge, and it's a welcome challenge. Phil Galliano and I are having a lot of fun with it. At the same time, there comes a little bit of angst because, again, it's one of those, it's one of the things that's a first. It's just the first time it's ever been done, and so I think the training of all the players is very important. Having everybody understand the rules. We've sat in there at team meetings multiple times so far and educating everybody. Every single guy in the team on all the different aspects of the rules, how they're going to relate to the end of the game scenarios, even with the quarterbacks, and so it's been pretty neat. And I'll be honest with you, it's been trial and error. I mean, we've already tried some things, and I'm like, there's no way we're doing that. And we've tried some things, and I'm like, this looks really good. And whether it's blocking technique or a complete scheme on how we're going to run a return, or kickoff, how the guys are getting off the line, or where your eyes are, all those little intricacies. And so, I think that's why I said earlier about the preseason games. And we're going to not only have eyes on our preseason games, we're going to have eyes across the league on the other 31 teams on how people are doing things. Because I think the quicker everyone figures this out, both coaches and players, it's going to be a major advantage to certain teams.
So do you feel like you have a leg up at all, having been so involved in creating this, or does everyone kind of on the same?
Well, listen, I think I know I understand the rules. That I definitely know. Whether or not I have a leg up, I think we're all kind of at the starting line right now, and because it's a whole new world out there. We're going into a whole new frontier of special teams football, and so I think I definitely maybe have a very good understanding of what the rules are all about, but the actual application of the rules and the schemes and the all that's all brand new to everybody. So
you got like this time last year, we were all trying to figure out how to pronounce Blake's name. Now he's kind of coming in as the guy. What have you seen from him this year? Is he just a little more confident kind of going in?
Listen, like any rookie going into year two, you kind of guys been through the process already. There's nothing that he hasn't been through yet, and so this time of year is great. Listen, today we had a nice 20-mile-an-hour left-to-right wind, which we don't see a lot of. It's good for us to get practice at. I mean, we don't play many outdoor games on grass with so just to get that work today was pretty cool. Definitely more confident. I see him out here. Obviously, we have Charlie from Ireland, and I see him out here coaching him up a little bit because here's a guy that's brand new to the whole thing, and so But I think him and Lou, never really had an off season before, and so to kind of see those guys attack this off season, I've seen a major improvement in both guys. They got a chance to get a little rest, and then they've kind of been working on the things that they felt like they needed to work on the most. And so I see both those guys doing that out here. Obviously everyone talks about that big jump from year 1 to year 2. I think we'll see that out of both guys this year. I do.
And then going back to the kickoff rule,
Yeah.
a guy like JT Gray, who's always been so good at getting down there, does this kind of limit him a little bit? As far as
I think it really depends on. Honestly, it depends on how you end up playing it. I think the kick return is going to end up being a big time matchup game. There's going to be a lot of one-on-one blocking. There's going to be. It's kind of like hockey. It's kind of like line shifts in hockey. They have their big guys. We got our big guys. They got their fast guys. Same thing with basketball. It's going to be a little bit of a personnel matchup, Steve. So some teams may go bigger. We may have to go bigger. Some teams may go smaller, and vice versa. We're trying to find out and figure out the best combinations for what we're going to do on our kickoff. I can tell you JT's to let the cat out of the bag. He'll be one of the guys out there for sure. And I don't think it limits him. In some ways, it could help a guy like that because, JT's been a guy that's always been kind of targeted for double teams and things like that, where maybe he could create some more single blocks and might be able to be a little bit more productive. And so, again, those are all things that are going to play out. It'll be interesting to see how that does. But the ability to move guys around on the kickoff team, and that's what all the coaches are trying to figure out right now.
Is there an example of something that you tried and then ruled out that you could share on kickoff?
I don't want to be too specific, but we've, just the blocking technique. Think about the front line guys in the setup zone. That's a really, really difficult technique. The old way and the new way is really difficult. And so because those kickoff players were only 5 yards away and they're getting a jump start on you, we'd be kind of messing around with techniques on how to either drop, attack, level, footwork, back kind of like a defensive back would, kind of like almost like a man-to-man coverage. And so we kind of ruled out a couple of techniques we first started with in terms of how we were going to do some of that stuff, whether it's the drop depth or the footwork. And so the body angles, you have to have a foot on the line. So how do I stand? Left foot, right foot, both feet, and so there's been some of that stuff. Again, I don't want to get too detailed on it, but that's, just kind of messing around with that exact technique has been interesting.
So it seems like y'all have spent a lot of extra time in meetings on all of the new rules and things like that. Have y'all spent extra time at practice on it yet, or is
We
it
have.
expected?
This time last year, we had not practiced as much kickoff return as we have this year. The main focus this time last year was clearly on punt and field goal a little bit more, not as much kick return. Tomorrow we'll get a little bit 11 on 11 going the next 2 days actually, and we really hadn't done a whole lot of that in the spring before. We kind of saved that towards the end of training camp, where now we want to see, we've kind of done a whole, kind of installed the entire thing, and now we've been kind of working on sections of it, and now we're going to kind of put it all together. So that's something we haven't really done before in the 5 years that I've been here. So that's definitely something new in terms of the application of the rules.
You had one of the, arguably, I don't know if you agree, but one of the more unconventional punters in the NFL last year. And what went into the thinking, essentially doubling down on him for a second year? What kind of factored into that?
Well, I think I don't read a whole lot of media, but I have seen some of the stuff come across my desk about all the things that Lou did poorly. But we've focused on all the things that he's done well. We were one of the top 5 teams in the league in return yards against, total return yards against, pinning people back inside the 20, field position, all that. So we kind of want him to pick up where he left off there, and we want him to improve on some of the aspects of his game that he needed to improve on, some of the conventional punt stuff. We feel like if he can add that stuff to what he already did last year, the sky's going to be the limit for him because, as you know, I've seen a lot written about his hang times and all that kind of stuff, which, again, I know I've talked to you guys about that before. A lot of the punts he hit last year, we weren't trying to get hang time on him, so I kind of chuckle myself when I look at some of those stats. So it all depends on what we're asking the guy to do. We asked him to be more of a placement punter, limit the return yards against punter, and he did that. We asked him to, when he had the opportunity to pin teams back and make them go the long field, he did that very, very well. So there was plenty of things he needed to work on, just like every other player, and so that's what we're kind of focusing on here. But the couple times he's been out here so far working on conventional punting, he's really improved on that in the offseason. So I think that's something we can add to his game. I think he's just going to continue to improve. So
he obviously has the leg for the booming,
Yep.
flip the field punt, do you think?
Yeah, I think there was a narrative out there that he didn't have a lot of leg strength because of some of the numbers, which I think it's a false narrative. He does. It's just we didn't ask him to do a whole lot of that, which we may ask him to do more of that this year coming up.
Darren, just
Yep.
I know the follow
Yeah, all good.
we're talking about, but
Yeah.
everything you say makes sense, and obviously the lack of return yards is
Yeah.
a number that stands out. But net average still being sort of the end all be all. Like,
Yeah.
what led to him having one of the lower net averages in the league?
A lot of it has to do with where we're punting the ball from. You'd be surprised at how many times last year, or maybe not, how many times we punted the ball between the 40s. So when Phil and I break down the season, sometimes numbers can lie to you, right?
Yeah.
So if you're punting the ball a lot of times between the 40s, you don't have the gross potential and the net potential because the field is limited.
Right.
We didn't have a lot of punts backed up last year. Our offense did a heck of a job of getting the ball and kind of getting those couple of first downs. We had very minimal punts from a backed up position. So you shrink the field, and so your gross and net capability goes way down. And so sometimes that's how the numbers can lie. Well, that's why his numbers, return number average against was very good, and that's why his pin percentage was very good because we had a lot of punts from the middle part of the field. You know, and so that's why some of those numbers can sometimes not tell the whole story.
You sound like an economist.
And on that note, I'll see you guys.